Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that one woman failed not once, not twice, but 9 times in front of critics, in front of her own doubts, and sometimes in front of the very people she hoped would believe in her? What if I told you that every single time she got back up, the world grew quieter, her circle grew smaller, and her heart grew heavier, but she still stood? And what if I told you that on the 10th time, when even she didn't know if she could try again, the entire world stopped and watched her win? But this isn't just about her, it's about you. Because in her fight, in her silence, in her struggle, lies a truth the world rarely tells you. That failure is not your end, it is your foundation. And that truth, believe it or not, was written 1,400 years ago, not in a best-selling book, not in a motivational quote, but in the pages of the Quran itself. Today we're going deep, not just into her journey, but into the shocking discoveries scientists are now uncovering that align exactly with what the Quran has said all along. This is not a coincidence. This is proof that if you've ever failed, ever been broken, ever felt like giving up, you're exactly where your transformation begins. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a revelation. And by the end of this video, you won't just believe in her victory. You'll start believing in yours. She failed not once or twice, but 9 times. And with every failure, the world around her grew quieter, the people's doubts louder, and her own heart heavier. Yet somehow, deep in that silence, there was a whisper that told her to try again. Not because she was sure she would succeed the next time, but because something inside her refused to accept that failure was her final story. That whisper wasn't ego, it wasn't pride, it was purpose. A purpose that kept burning even when the lights went out, when the applause faded, and when her own reflection seemed to question her worth. You see, people often believe success is about being perfect, about getting it right the first time, about never making mistakes. But that's not how greatness works. That's not how destiny works. And that's certainly not how the Quran describes the journey of human excellence. When she stood up after the 9th fall, she wasn't standing up as the same woman who had once believed in shortcuts or easy victories. She was standing as someone who had tasted humiliation, rejection, criticism, doubt, and still believed that her story wasn't over. She didn't need everyone to believe in her. She just needed one reason to believe in herself. That reason? Purpose. When you live with purpose, failure does not destroy you. It educates you, it humbles you, it strips away your illusions and reveals your real foundation. And what was her foundation? Patience, prayer, grit, and a deep sense that the process was more important than the applause. The Quran tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, "O you who have believed, seek help through patience and prayer. Indeed, Allah is with the patient." That's not just spiritual advice, that's a divine blueprint for resilience. Science now backs what the Quran said centuries ago. Psychologists have found that when people connect their struggle to a deeper purpose, they perform better, recover faster, and remain emotionally stable. What the world calls mindset, the Quran calls niyyah, intention. Her intention wasn't to impress. Her intention wasn't to trend. Her intention was to fulfill a purpose that had been placed in her heart by something greater than herself. And when that's your drive, when you are moved by something sacred, you can afford to fail. Because failure doesn't define you, it refines you. Every no she heard was not a period, it was a comma in a long sentence being written by the author of her life. She learned to walk away from the noise, to silence the opinions, to kneel in prayer while the world scrolled past her story. And in that kneeling posture, in that surrender, she found power. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that endures. Scientists have observed that perseverance, what they call grit, is the strongest predictor of success, stronger than IQ, stronger than talent, stronger than privilege. And where does grit come from? It comes from falling 9 times and having the courage to rise the 10th. It comes from knowing that your destiny is not in the hands of a casting director, a boss, a crowd, or a comment section. It comes from knowing that your journey has already been recorded in the heavens and that every step is unfolding exactly as it was meant to. She didn't romanticize her failures. She didn't glamorize the pain. She admitted it. She bled through it. She cried when the doors slammed in her face, but she never gave up. Why? Because she understood that purpose is more powerful than pain. And when your purpose is pure, even your losses are preparing you. The Quran gives us the stories of prophets, not because they were flawless, but because they failed in the eyes of the world and yet remained undefeated in the eyes of God. Prophet Musa was rejected by his own people. Prophet Joseph was thrown into a well by his own brothers. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was mocked, exiled, and targeted. But none of these men allowed failure to stop them. Why? Because their strength was not in their status, it was in their sabr, their unwavering belief in purpose over perfection. That is what she carried. She wasn't trying to be viral. She was trying to be valuable. And every time she fell, she learned something her success could never teach her. She learned what it means to get back up when nobody is watching. She learned what it feels like to rebuild when you're still bleeding. She learned that sometimes God delays your victory so that your soul can be strong enough to hold it when it arrives. Scientists now talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through repetition and struggle. The Quran had already taught that. It told us that humans are created in toil and effort, that with hardship comes ease, that every difficulty is paired with growth. She didn't see failure as a punishment, she saw it as preparation. And that's what made the 10th time so powerful. It wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence, it was the natural result of divine programming meeting human perseverance. The world saw her win, but she knew it wasn't the 10th attempt that made the difference. It was the 9 before it, the silent battles, the quiet tears, the nights she begged for a way forward. All of that built a strength that could not be shaken. When she finally crossed that finish line, when the cameras flashed and the world clapped, she stood there not just as a winner, but as a witness. A witness that purpose beats perfection every time. That faith defeats fear every time, and that with God on your side, even your worst chapter can become your greatest testimony. There are people who chase success for the applause, and there are those who chase it for the assignment. She was the latter. She wasn't interested in impressing the world. She was focused on fulfilling the promise placed in her soul. And so she walked through the fires of failure, not because she enjoyed the pain, but because she knew that gold must be refined in heat. Every setback stripped her of ego, every loss taught her humility, every rejection sharpened her character, until finally, she wasn't just ready to win, she was ready to carry what winning would demand from her. Because success isn't just a moment, it's a responsibility. And those who haven't been broken can't be trusted to carry blessings. That's what the Quran teaches, that's what science affirms, and that's what she lived. Her story was not a fairy tale, it was a furnace. And on the 10th try, when the world finally looked up and saw her rise, they didn't just see a champion, they saw proof that struggle is sacred, that purpose never dies, and that those who are faithful in the dark will shine the brightest when the light finally arrives. She failed not once, not twice, but 9 times. And each of those failures felt like a brick added to the weight she already carried in her soul. It wasn't just the disappointment of dreams deferred, it was the eyes watching her, the whispers echoing behind her back, the judgment in people's silence, and the loud doubt in her own heart. Yet despite the noise, something deep within her refused to vanish, refused to quit, refused to surrender to the label of failure. It wasn't arrogance that kept her going, it was purpose. And that kind of purpose doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't need validation, it doesn't wait for applause. It simply wakes up with her every morning, walks with her through every rejection, and tucks her into bed with tears in her eyes and prayers on her lips. Purpose is different from motivation. Motivation fades when the pain comes. But purpose leans into that pain, knowing that there's something worth enduring it for. That's what gave her the courage to try again, even when logic told her to stop, even when people told her to quit, even when her track record looked like nothing but evidence that she should walk away. In the Quran, there's a powerful thread that runs through the stories of every prophet, every believer, every person who eventually emerged into the light. And that thread is not perfection, it's persistence. There is not a single story of triumph in the Quran that did not come after trial. There is no reward mentioned that didn't follow some degree of resistance. That's not a coincidence. That's a divine pattern. When Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, indeed Allah is with the patient, it's not merely a spiritual consolation, it's a statement of strategy. The kind of patience being described here isn't passive. It's not the kind where someone just sits and waits. It's the kind that works while waiting. The kind that tries again even when every attempt before ended in disappointment. It's the kind that believes in the unseen when the seen offers nothing but failure. That's the kind of patience she embodied. Psychologists and scientists now speak about something called grit, which they define as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Research shows that this quality, not intelligence, not talent, not luck, is the #1 predictor of success. Grit is what keeps people going when things fall apart. Grit is what makes someone return to their craft, their calling, their mission, even after it seems impossible. The Quran spoke of this long before any researcher labeled it. The stories of Musa, of Yusuf, of Ayub, and of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are drenched in grit. Each of these men faced what the world would call failure, sometimes repeatedly, sometimes in public, sometimes at the hands of those closest to them. And yet, they got back up. Not because they had guarantees, but because they had guidance. That's the same unseen power she held on to. Every time she failed, a lesser voice tried to tell her that maybe she just wasn't good enough, that maybe this dream wasn't hers, that maybe she misunderstood her calling. But purpose has a way of fighting back. It doesn't silence those voices with arrogance. It silences them with remembrance, with the quiet recitation of verses like, indeed, with hardship comes ease, not after, with. That means the very moment she was being crushed by defeat, she was also being carried by divine design. The moment she was being denied by people, she was being prepared by God. And you can't always see that preparation. Scientists now know that struggle activates the brain in ways that comfort cannot. That new neural pathways are forged through challenge. That resilience is not just emotional, but physiological. The Quran told us this in a more poetic way, that humans are created in struggle, that the soul is shaped through adversity. So when she cried over her 9th failure, when she doubted everything she'd ever hoped for, when she felt like giving up, something unseen was being formed inside her. Strength, clarity, faith. These things don't grow in success. They grow in the soil of suffering. She didn't fail because she was weak. She failed because she was being taught. Taught to let go of outcomes and focus on effort. Taught to silence the world and listen to her Lord. Taught to recognize that the world rewards quick success, but the heavens reward consistent sincerity. On the 10th time, when everything changed, when the same world that had ignored her finally stood to applaud, when the same people who doubted her began to speak her name with respect, she didn't feel vindicated, she felt humbled, because she knew that victory wasn't just about winning. It was about who she had become through the loss. That's why her win wasn't just a moment. It was a message that you can fall 9 times and still be written to rise on the 10th. A message that purpose doesn't die just because plans do. A message that when you anchor your life to something higher, no amount of failure can keep you down forever. Every step of her journey was laced with the principles the Quran repeatedly affirms: trust, patience, prayer, and action. She trusted in something she couldn't yet see. She waited without bitterness. She prayed not just for results, but for resilience. And she acted even when the odds were against her. That formula isn't exclusive to her. It's available to anyone who chooses to believe that life is bigger than one moment, one loss, or one opinion. And it's the reason why her 9th failure didn't stop her, because her heart wasn't fixed on outcomes, it was fixed on obedience. That's the shift that transformed her journey. She went from trying to impress the world to trying to fulfill what she felt she was created for. And when that shift happened, everything changed. In today's world, we're constantly told to chase instant results, to avoid discomfort, to quit if things don't happen fast. But the Quran's message is the exact opposite. It tells us that struggle is part of the story, that delay doesn't mean denial, that sometimes God withholds success until you're spiritually and emotionally strong enough to carry it with dignity. That's what her 9th failure did for her. It stripped away ego, it silenced the noise, it exposed the cracks in her foundation, and it gave her the tools to rebuild, not with vanity, but with vision. And when the 10th try came around, when all the doors that were once locked finally opened, she walked through, not as a victim of her past, but as the author of her future, because she understood that failure was never the enemy, it was the instructor. There's a verse in the Quran that says, perhaps you hate something and it is good for you, and perhaps you love something and it is bad for you, and Allah knows while you know not. That was her story in one line. She hated the pain of falling. She hated the silence of rejection. She hated the nights where hope felt like a fantasy. But every one of those moments built the woman the world would later admire, because you don't become strong by winning. You become strong by surviving. By showing up when no one claps, by choosing faith when doubt is loud, by remembering your why when everything else is screaming, why not? That's what purpose does. It keeps you grounded when the world gets shaky. It keeps you moving when the path disappears. It keeps you whole when failure tries to break you. So when she looked back on those 9 failed attempts, she didn't see wasted time. She saw sacred preparation. She saw the fingerprints of a higher plan. She saw herself not as someone who was delayed, but as someone who was being deeply developed. And that is the most powerful truth of all. When you are driven by purpose, you are not just moving toward a goal, you are being shaped into someone who can handle that goal with grace. That's why her 10th attempt wasn't luck, it was legacy. A legacy built not on perfection, but on persistence. And when the world finally watched her win, they weren't just witnessing a success story, they were witnessing the victory of purpose over pressure, the triumph of faith over failure, and the undeniable power of rising again and again until the world had no choice but to see what God had already written. In the end, her story wasn't about 9 failures or even the final win. It was about what carried her through them all: purpose. Not fleeting motivation, not the opinions of the crowd, but a deep, unshakable purpose anchored in faith, patience, and the belief that nothing is wasted in the hands of the one who created her. Her journey is a living testament that the Quran's wisdom isn't theoretical, it's transformational. It teaches that persistence, sabr, and trust in divine timing aren't just noble ideas, but proven pathways to greatness. When she rose on the 10th attempt, the world saw a victory, but what they didn't see was the fire she walked through to get there. She is not alone in this journey. Every person who dares to rise after being knocked down is walking in the same sacred footsteps. Let her story be your reminder that you are not too late, not too broken, not too far gone. If you hold on to your purpose, guided by faith and fortified by resilience, your time will come. And when it does, it will be bigger, deeper, and more meaningful than anything you ever imagined. May you carry forward with strength in your heart and purpose in your soul. May your setbacks build you, not break you, and may you trust that every fall is only a setup for a stronger return. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing that your story is still being written. Keep rising, keep moving. Your 10th moment is coming. Good luck, and may every step you take be guided by light.